Hi, welcome back to PSLE Concept Mastery Lessons for Primary 5. Now we are going to resume where we stopped last year. So far we have covered all the P4 topics and now we are going into Primary 5 topics. So we have already done a few topics on P5. So the last lesson that we did on P5 was angles, right? Property of angles in triangles. So we're going to continue with our angles again, but this time we are going to look at angles in four-sided figures. So what's the lesson here? Now the lesson here is to know the properties, right? To understand and to remember and to memorize the properties so that you can use the properties to solve problems that have angles inside. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Now, the first property is to look for a letter Z. So there are some special letters you have to look for. So when do you look out for letter Z? When you have parallel lines. Okay, when you see parallel lines, like for example, right, once you see two lines that are parallel, you can look out for a letter Z. So how does it look like? Now your letter Z will be something like this, right? That's your alphabet letter. But in math, right, the Z can be different kinds. It can also be laterally inverted, means it can be the other way. You can flip to the other side. The letter Z can also appear like letter N, alright, letter N. Okay, it can also be this way. So you have to look out for letter Z when you see something like this. Okay, now so whenever there are two lines that are parallel, then you will have all this. You have the letter. Okay, so let's look at the diagram. So if you look at the two lines that are parallel, you can actually see a letter Z. Alright, a Z that is like standing, right? Slanted, right? That's a bit slanted. So when you have a letter Z, then what does it tell you? It tells you that the angle between the two red lines will be the same as the angle between the other two red lines. So they are equal, they are the same. So this angle will be 53 degrees. So you're supposed to find angle C. Alright, so how do we find angle C? Now, in your last lesson on angles in triangles, so every time you see a triangle, what kind of triangle did we learn? We learned about isosceles triangle. It means that you have two sides that are equal, right? Two sides equal. So which two angles are equal? Then you look at the angles at the end of the two lines that are equal. The angles, right? The angles at the end of these two lines that are equal. Okay? So these two angles that I mark out will be the same. So how do you find each of these two angles? Sum of angles in a triangle, which is 180, you minus 53. Okay, and then you must divide by 2. Why do you divide by 2? Because isosceles triangle has two angles that are equal, so divide by 2. And what do you get? Alright, so let me use my calculator quickly. So you have 180 minus 53, and then you divide by 2, you will get 74 degrees. And whatever numbers you found, you put inside. Alright, 74, here also 74. Alright, okay, now can you find angle C? So if you still remember, angle on the straight line. So every time there's a straight line, then what happened? Then the entire angle, right? The angle on the straight line add together is 180 degrees. So your angle C will be how many? 180, which is angle on the straight line, minus 53 and minus 74. Alright, and you will get your angle C. So 180 minus 53 minus 74, you will get angle C, which is 53 degrees. So you have solved your problem, angle C. So what is the lesson here for this first part of the lesson? Now, the lesson here is to look out for letter Z. When you see two lines, they are parallel. So every time they are parallel lines, look out for the letter Z. Alright, now, let's go down. And you can see that you have another letters, you have another few lines that are parallel. So for example, if you look at this line, and you also look at this line, they are parallel. So where is the letter Z? Your letter Z will be something like this. Okay, this is your letter Z. So if I were to maybe erase this part, now you can see the letter Z more clearly, right? The letter Z. So every time you see a letter Z, then what does it tell you? It tells you that the angle between the two blue lines will be the same as the angle between the other two blue lines. So the angle in between will be the same. Alright, now if you look at another pair of parallel lines. Can you see another pair? There's one line that's parallel, and then there's also another line that's parallel. So you also have another letter Z, right? Another letter Z. Okay, so if this is 19 degrees, right, the angle between the two green lines, 19, then the angle between the other two green lines will also be 19. Okay, 19. All right, then can we find what is the right angle? What is the right angle in between? What's the right angle over here? You take 57, right? 57 is the entire angle that you see, 57, and you cut away 19 or minus 19, you will get 38 degrees. So this right angle here is 38 degrees. Okay, and because there's a z on top, right? If you remember the z on top, right? So if this angle is 38 degrees, then the other right angle must also be equal 38 degrees, right? So now can I find angle C? So you remember your lesson, which is angle on a straight line is 180 degrees minus 38, and your angle C will be 142 degrees. So again, if you see lines that are parallel, look out for the letter Z. Alright, so every time you see a letter Z, then the angles in between the two lines are equal. Okay, so let's go to the next property. Now the next property is seldom mentioned, right? Seldom mentioned in schools, which is to look for letter F. Alright, so how does letter F looks like in the alphabetical order? It looks like this, letter F. But in math, the F can be any kind of F. It can also be a F like this, alright, in math, right? Your F. Alright, it also look like a F. It can also be like this. It's also like a F. So when do you look out for F? When you have two lines that are parallel, then you look out for letter F. Alright, sometimes you can see, sometimes you cannot see. But if you can see, then it makes the solving easier. So let's look at how to find angle D. So if you look carefully, you can see that there's a F that is lying down. So look, when there are two lines that are parallel, you have a F that is lying down. And then what happens? Then the angle between these two red lines will be the same as the angle between these two red lines. Okay, shall we go back to our pictures again? Like for example, this angle will be the same as this angle, and this angle will be the same as this angle, right? This angle will be the same as this angle, and I can draw many more types of F, like that. Okay, something like that. Okay, then this angle will be the same as this angle. So your F can be different kinds of F. It can also be like that. Okay, so as long as you see two lines that are parallel, then this angle will be the same as this angle. Alright, it will be the same. Got it? So the two lines that are parallel are connected by a line that you see over here. And once you see this line, then the angle will be the same. Alright, the angles will be equal to each other. Okay, so let's continue with how we find letter D. Okay, how we find the angle D. So if you look carefully, there is another F that is lying down or upside down. There's an F that's upside down. So you only look for F when you see two lines that are parallel. So if there are no lines that are parallel, then you cannot find this letter. So which means that this angle and this angle will be the same. Alright, they are identical. So if the angle is 62, then your angle here, angle D, must also be 62 degrees. So that's how you solve. Alright, that's how you look out for this letter when you see lines that are parallel. Okay, let's look at another example. Now you can see that, wow, it gets a bit harder already. So how do you find angle G? Well, don't have to worry, because can you see this F that's upside down? Right, this F. And most importantly, you have the lines that are parallel. Alright, you must have the lines that are parallel. And this F, if you look carefully at the angle, that's 39. So which angle do you think is also 39 degrees over here? So this must also be 39 degrees, right? And then if you look carefully, there is a right angle. Alright, there's a right angle over here, a right angle. So which means that you can find this angle already. So you take right angle, which is 90, and you minus 39, you get 51 degrees. So let's put down 51 degrees. Okay, then if you look carefully, do you see another F? There is another F which is lying down. And of course, make sure you have two lines that are parallel before you look for this letter F. So if this is 51 degrees, then which angle is also 51? Which is here, 51 degrees, right? Okay, so now can I find your letter G already? So how do I find the angle G? If you still remember angle on a straight line, right? Angle on a straight line, which is 180. So angle on a straight line is 180 degrees. And then you minus your 51, you will get this angle, right? This angle, which is your letter angle G. So 180 minus 51, and you get 129 degrees. So your angle G is actually 129 degrees, and you solve already. So lesson here, look out for the letter F, which is seldom mentioned in school, right? But there is such a letter F that you can see sometimes, right? Sometimes in angle problem, you may have this letter. Okay, now let's move to so what kind of letters have we done so far? You have the X, which is our earlier part of the lesson. Look for angle X. Look for letter X. Look for letter Z. Look for letter F. All right. So now let's look at four-sided figures. All right, parallelogram, a four-sided figures. So what are the properties inside a four-sided figures? So if you see a parallelogram, you must know that there are two lines that are parallel, and another pair of two lines that are parallel. Very important property. Okay, so the first property is what? Opposite angles in the parallelogram are the same. So if this is for 78 degrees, then the opposite angle here will be 78 degrees. Okay, that's the first property. Opposite angles are equal. So if this angle is maybe is 102 degrees, then the opposite angles here will also be 102 degrees. Opposite angles. What do you mean by opposite angles? It means that very far away. Okay, very far away. It's quite a big distance away. Opposite angles. Okay, you can see that this angle here. All right, this angle is across. All right, opposite across. Okay, opposite. So that's what we call opposite angles are equal. Okay, now let's go to the next one. Another parallelogram. All right. So every time you see parallelogram, and when you can see two lines that are parallel, then you look out for the letters, the Z, the F. So in this diagram, you don't have a F, but you definitely have a Z, right? A few Z's. So find angle WZY. So where is your WZY, which is over here? So mark out the question mark in the exams, and WSY, so over here. Okay, so how do we do that? Now, because this is a parallelogram, so opposite angles are the same. So your angle WZY will be 69 degrees. Okay? Alright, then what else do we learn? Now, in your previous lesson on angles, look out for triangles. Alright, look out for triangles, because if you see a triangle, then what do you do? Alright, then you need to apply some properties if you see some triangles. So what properties do you apply? So this is a triangle that you can see. Sum of angles, that is a property. Sum of angles in the triangle is 180 minus 37 and 69. Alright, so what are we doing actually? Now, what's the lesson here? Now, the lesson here is to look out for easy angles. Easy angles that you can find without thinking very hard. Look out for angles that you can find. Okay, so that blue angle we can find. So you take 180 minus, okay, 180 minus 37 minus 69, and you get the easy angle, 74 degrees. And whatever angles you found, you just put inside there. Alright, so when you do angle problem, don't care about what the question wants you to find. Go and look for angles that are easy to find, and then sooner or later you will be able to find the question mark, because angle on a straight line, if you still remember, the first property that we talk about is angle on a straight line is 180, and you minus 74, and you get 106. So which means that the question mark here is 106 degrees, which is your WSY, and you solve. Alright, so if you see a parallelogram, then opposite angles are equal, and look out for letter Z. Oh, by the way, where are the letter Z? Okay, there are a few letter Z's you can see. The first letter Z will be here. Look at the green color, right? Green color Z. So if this is 74 degrees, then this side will also be 74 degrees, letter Z. Okay, alright. Alright, so not that hard. Alright, not that hard to find the letter Z. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, the next one. Okay, what happens if you see a parallelogram? Is there any other properties that we need to know? Yes, the angles between two parallel lines add together is 180. So if you can see these two lines, they are parallel, right? So these two lines are joined together by a base by this line, okay, by this side. So when you see two lines are parallel, then the angles between means it means what? In the middle lah, something like in the middle, between. So the angle B plus angle by plus 69, your angle B plus 69 degrees must add together equal 180. Now this property is very, very, very important because with this property you can solve a lot of the harder problems on angles. Sometimes pupils cannot solve the difficult problems is because of this property. They don't remember this property. So angles between two lines that are parallel add together is 180. So what is your letter B? Your angle B will be 180 minus 69 and you will get 111, right? 111 degrees. Okay, so let's put down 111 degrees, and of course we understand that opposite angles in a parallelogram are the same, right? So the opposite angles here will be 111, and the angle here will be also opposite to 69. So opposite angles are the same, right? Okay, and then if you look carefully, you will notice that there is another pair. Okay, there is another pair of parallel lines if you notice carefully, right? So these two lines are parallel. And what do you notice about these two lines that are parallel? If you look at the angles between them, right? The angles between them, and if you plus them together, you will also realize, that the angles between two lines that are parallel, they also add together is 180. Okay? So what's the lesson here? The lesson here is every time you see two lines that are parallel, the angles between them must add together to become 180 degrees. Okay, that is a very important property that you can use to solve harder problems. Okay, now let's look at trapezium. Now, what is special about trapezium? Trapezium is also a four-sided figure, but it only has two lines that are parallel, unlike your parallelogram, unlike your rhombus. Trapezium has only one pair of lines that's parallel. Okay, now same property as well. If you see two lines that are parallel, okay, which is this one and this one, and the angles between them, where are the angles between these two lines that are parallel? These two angles, they must add together equal 180. Okay, so which means that I can find angle A. So angle A will be 180 minus 59, and I get 121. So my angle A is 121 degrees. Okay, now the lesson is this. Okay, now the lesson. Can you see these two lines and this line? Okay, these two lines. So do you think the two angles will add together equal 180? No, cannot be, right? Because the two lines, the two blue lines, are not parallel. So therefore, the angles between the two blue lines cannot add together 180. You must have two lines that are parallel. Then they will add together to be 180. Okay, that is something that you must know. Okay? Alright, so let's go to the next one, rhombus. So what do we know about rhombus? Now rhombus is like a square, but it's a slanted square. Okay, rhombus is very special because it's like a square, so which means that all the sides are equal. So I would like to do this so that you can see something else. You can see that the rhombus is actually made of two isosceles triangle. Right? Do you see two isosceles triangle inside? Yeah. Okay, then how do we find angle F? Well, same thing. Every time you see a rhombus, right? You have two lines that are parallel. Okay, and also these two lines, they are parallel. Of course, you can look for letter Z, right? Letter Z or letter F. But in this diagram, there's no letter F, but you can find a letter Z. Okay, so what is the property of rhombus? Opposite angles are the same. So your letter F is 36 degrees. Okay, that is your property, the first property of rhombus, right? So opposite angles are equal. Okay, now let's go to the next one. And okay, now like what we say just now, a rhombus is like a square that is slanted, or like a diamond. So how do you find the letter D? Now, if you look carefully, like what I said, all the sides are equal. So which means that the rhombus is made of two isosceles. Okay, two isosceles triangle. So what does that mean? It means that your angle D is the same as 55 degrees. Because in an isosceles triangle, what do you have? You have two angles that are the same. Okay, now another thing to take note about rhombus, very easy. Okay, it's actually quite easy to remember the properties. The rhombus is actually cut into half, right, like a symmetric figure. So which means the right side and the left side the same. Okay, they're the same. So which means what? Which means that this angle here is the same as 55, and this angle here is also the same as 55. All right, they are equal, right? They are two equal parts. The rhombus is cut into two identical parts. And of course, if I want to find this angle, how do I find that? You find the sum of angles in this triangle, right? In this triangle. So sum of angles in the triangle is 180 minus 55, and you minus 55 again, and you will get how many? 70 degrees. And because the rhombus is like cut into half, so you have the other triangle that's also identical. So over here is also 70 degrees. Or opposite angles in the rhombus are the same. Okay, so what do you know about rhombus? What must you know about rhombus? Rhombus is cut into half. So you have two sides, two equal sides, which will look identical. Okay, and that is what you must know. Okay, now let's go to the next one. All right. Okay, now next one. Okay, now we're going to put our, okay, there's one more property over here. Now, sum of angles, right, so far in the last lesson, we talked about triangles. Sum of angles in a three-sided figure, which is a triangle, add together is 180. So every time you see a triangle, all right, triangle, the sum of angles, which is the three angles inside, add together will be 180, right? But what happens if you see a four-sided figure? Now, if you see a four-sided figure, it can be a parallelogram, it can be a trapezium, it can be any four-sided figure, any four-sided. Okay, so this angle plus this angle, all the angles inside add together will be 360 degrees. So this is also another property that you have to remember. Because sometimes when you forget this property, then you can't solve this question, which you see on the board, right? So sum of angles in a four-sided figure, right? Four-sided figure always add together become 360 degrees. Okay, so how do we find the angle BAD? So in your exam, it's important to always mark out the question mark, right? So that you know what you're finding, which is that question mark. And then what do? Look for easy angles. What easy angle? This angle, right? You can find this angle. So what is this angle? 180, sum of angles on a straight line, right? Every time you see a straight line, there's something called angles on a straight line, right? Which is 180, and you minus 125, you will get 55 degrees, and you put the angle inside, and then there's a right angle, which is your 90. Any more easy angle to find? Yes, another one here. Again, you see there is a straight line, so there is a angle on the straight line, minus 37, right? And that will give you 143. So you put over here, all right, 43, and then you are stuck because you forgot your property. Then you must remember, every time you see a four-sided, so that's one side, okay, this is one side, two side, three side, and now you have four sides. So the angles inside, right, the angles inside this four-sided figure add together is 360 degrees. So can I find the question mark? Yes, of course I can. I take 360 minus 55 minus 90 and minus 143, and you will get the angle BAD. So what's the angle? So 360 minus 55 minus 90, and you minus 143, so that question mark will be 72 degrees. And whatever answer you found, you put inside your picture, so it looks clearer, right? So that's the property, sum of angles in a four-sided figure. Okay, let's look at another example. Okay, I think the last one. Okay, now sometimes in the exam you don't have numbers at all. You only have letters. Then how do we solve this? Now remember, methods are the same, right? No matter how difficult the question is, the methods are always the same. Same for properties. Properties are still there. It's still the same property, even though the question gets a little harder. So you are not tested on something that you never learn. All right, like some like when you do your PSLE questions, some of the students will tell the parents, the question looks so complicated, like never learned before, like they never see before, never learned before. Yeah, it may be very different kind of question, but the methods, the concept, the methods are all the same. It means that you have learned the methods, you have learned the concepts, so you're expected to apply what you learn onto a question that can be very different. Okay? Alright, so in this question, it looks very different because no numbers. But what is the sum of all the letters? Then you remember what you learn. Okay, what do you learn? You learn about triangles. So what do you know about triangles? The sum of angles in the triangle. Add together 180. Okay, so the sum of angles in a triangle add together is 180 degrees. And then you also learn about four-sided figure, and the sum of angles inside the four-sided figure add together is 360, right? So if you add up all the letters, all the angles together, then what is the sum of all the angles inside this figure? That will give you 540 degrees. So you have learned the properties. So you are just using the properties to solve something that you never see before. And this is what will happen in the exam. You will have a chance, or you will see questions that you never see before, and then it may be totally entirely new, but the methods and the properties and whatever you have learned is still there, is still the same. Alright, you just have to apply what you learn. Okay, so that's the end of our PSLE Math Concept lesson on angles. So we have completed our properties, right? What are the properties in triangles? What are the properties of angles in the four-sided figure? So you should now be able to do all the angles problems already, right? So these are the basic lessons. These are the concept lessons that will provide you the basic understanding, all right, on how to use the properties, on what are the properties available, and how to use the properties to solve much harder problems. All right, so we come to the end of our PSLE Concept Mastery lesson. So stay tuned to the next Concept Mastery lesson. We will go on to cover other Primary 5 topics. And after the Primary 5 topics are done, then we will go into the Primary 6 topics. All right, so see you in the next lesson.